sweet potato fries and frozen creeks. It's episode 7 of Navy SEAL Week. Hello and welcome to the 7th edition of this special edition of Navy SEAL Week. I'm doing this in order to raise money for the Navy SEAL Foundation via the Tampa Bay Frogman Swim. It's a 3.1-mile swim across Tampa Bay to be held January 17th, 2016. I did it earlier this year, January 12th, 2015. It was my first time doing an open water swim, and I'm crazy enough to do it again. So you can donate at helpwestswim.org. That will redirect to the donation page. And all the donations, again, 100% goes to the Navy SEAL Foundation, and that goes to the families of Navy SEALs who have been wounded or killed, and it helps them just get back on their feet. So it's a great cause. It's a 4-star rated charity, so you can rest assured that your money is being used wisely and efficiently. Today's guest is Bruce Roberts. He's a little bit older, as he says, 58 years old to be precise. Early days, he was a frogman, and we talked about the difference between, just how they did it a little bit differently earlier, how they split up the SEALs training in the beginning, but fantastic guy. He's in the finance industry now, successful entrepreneur, but he talks about the ups and downs and just not quitting. So I think you will enjoy this session with Bruce Roberts. But before we jump into the interview with Bruce, I'd like to introduce you to a new way to grow your sales. I am giving away each week, starting now, my Sales Success Toolkit. It's worth over $100. It includes a signed copy of my new book. It takes more than a big smile, a good idea, and a Twitter account to build a business that lasts. You're also going to get my sales training flashcards, 2 CDs, and some other goodies I'll throw in there from time to time. All you have to do is subscribe, either on iTunes or Stitcher. Leave a 5-star review, and then text the word sales to 96,000 so I know that you did it. So again, just leave a 5-star review after you subscribe, and then text the word sales, S-A-L-E-S, to 96000. Now on to the interview. Bruce Roberts, former Navy SEAL, hanging out in Greenville, South Carolina, now the owner of CFG, Carolina Financial Group. Welcome to the Sales Podcast, man. How are you?
Doing great. Happy to be here. Thanks, Wes.
Thanks for helping out with the Frogman Swim, and helpwestswim.org is the URL I set up, so everyone can help donate, because I need all the help I can get. And I did not realize, as we were talking earlier, that you were at the swim this past January, and you'll be there again, so we can lift one up before and after the race. But
we'll look forward to it. It's this is actually my fifth swim, so
oh wow!
I can tell you, aim high on the last buoy.
Oh, well, I learned that painfully. So my buddy, he was also an Air Force grad. He was my kayaker, and I was just motoring along, and the current was kind of drifting me towards the finish line, right?
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, no, you got to go around the buoy. And I was like, dude, I'm not in a race. I'm just trying to finish, right? And he's like, you can do it. And it was totally against the current. So I spent 20 minutes trying to get around the last buoy. And
I don't know what it is. But I can tell you it rips at that point, and if you're not ahead of it coming off the second to last buoy, you're going to do what you just did, which is work the hardest at the wrong time of the swim.
Well, but, again, it's not a race, and it's like it was just a finish. Are we supposed to go around the buoys?
Yeah.
Or are they just aiming points?
They're there for a reason. I don't know.
Right.
I've always tried to get around them, and fortunately, I get better at it every year. But it's always surprising because it's about an hour and 15 minutes into a swim at that point. So I go, hell.
Exactly. I could have finished 20 minutes up, so I don't care what they say. My goal is just to survive and come home to the family. So,
there you go.
I'm going to take whatever path. Oh, man. Well, anyway, so, thanks for coming on. I mean, everybody that doesn't know you, that's listening, could you give us a little thumbnail sketch
We ran across each other through some mutual friends, the organizers of the race. Can you tell us how you got started in the military and what you did in the SEALs, and then how you transitioned into being
Sure.
an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm an older guy, so at 58 years old and Bud's class 108, that was back when you had both UDT and SEAL team, and then as now we tend to call ourselves more frogs or frogman than SEALs, I think. At least my part of that community is. But my father was actually a Navy pilot. Like me, he was a Navy ROTC grad, or I should say I was like him. He went through Miami of Ohio and came through as a pilot, flew off carriers, attack planes, and these were the last of the prop planes. And I have these vague memories of at a very young age. You may remember, I think, Wes, you're old enough to remember Sea Hunt, and it was all about scuba diving and all that stuff. And for a very brief period, we lived in California. Mostly we're from the Kentucky, but I can vaguely remember taking a Tinker Toy can, which were round, and I'd get string and I'd put it on my back to look like an aqualung. And I remember my dad saying, you ought to be a frogman. And then later on, I started swimming competitively, and I think he reinforced that. And then I ended up in Navy ROTC at Duke, starting in 75 and graduating in 79. And not really knowing the way the ROTC works is about 2 years into the program, you commit to it. And once you've committed, then you're destined to go into the service. If you don't graduate, you're going enlisted. If you do, you're going as an officer. And right. Navy being what it is, you can indicate what preferences you have. And it turned out Duke at the time had a very large hyperbaric chamber complex, and a group of frogs were actually led by Norm Olson, who ended up being a 4-star admiral. I think probably the first 4-star for the community. But at the time, I think he was probably lieutenant commander, and he had a group of frogs, and they were doing tests on the Mark 16 scuba rig and as a rebreather. And because they were around, they gave a presentation to our RTC group. It's probably 120 of us in the audience, and they showed a movie about these guys with shaved heads and getting muddy and telephone poles, and everybody's kind of laughing. And I was thinking, well, that sounds kind of cool, because I didn't know I wanted to do anyway. And so that got me on a track looking at buds. All this stuff just sort of crystallized. And then I was a December grad from Duke, so I got into a January class in Coronado. And then coming out of that, was introduced to the SDV program, swimmer delivery vehicles or SEAL delivery vehicles. These are wet submersibles. And so my time in the teams was really around the SDVs. I was a pilot and a navigator for those boats. And then my last year and a half was actually, I have an engineering degree, though I'm not a practicing engineer, but not many frogs do. And so when they were looking for a team to do the workups for the dry deck shelter, which is about a 40-foot long piece of gear you can put on the back of a submarine and turn it into a special operations platform, kind of turning a submarine into an aircraft, the equivalent of an aircraft carrier for SDVs right. and other special ops. So I was the first crew for that and took it through sea trials with a select crew that had been selected from East and West Coast teams. And that was a great experience. And then I went into banking and in California, and at that time there was a special operations group out of Vallejo, which was an active base back then. So I actually had a SEAL platoon for a number of years, and so I was a weekend warrior who got to stay active and was doing the more traditional SEAL team, small unit tactics and both jumping and diving and blowing stuff up and shooting small arms.
So the SEALs have a reserve team?
They do. They've got they're largely. I only stayed active in it for about 3 years, but because then we moved from California and I moved to Central Kentucky, and the travel to a team, would have been ridiculous, and we started having kids.
Right.
What happens to a lot of people, but yeah, there's a team out of the main team was is still out of Coronado, and there was sort of an offshoot up in Vallejo, which I doubt is there now. And then the other one was two stations, largely out of Little Creek, Virginia, but I think also they had a detachment or something up in Maine, of all places, which sounds like kind of a crappy place to be a frogman. But anyway, no brain, no pain.
Well, I was like, I had Joel Lambert on, and he talks about his first day, with the teams. He got sent to Virginia Beach, and he said it was January, I think, midwinter, and then it was below freezing. They were crunching on the sand on the beach, and they're like, okay, 2 mile swim, let's go. It's like, what?
Yeah, my first day at my first day at what was UDT 22, I was, we were standing there for morning muster, and teams being what they were at the time, actually Little Creek was frozen over at that point, if you can imagine. And we're standing there freezing, and I get jumped by a bunch of my new teammates, and they throw me off the pier through the ice. So, yeah. And I thought I can remember I can still remember flying through the air. It's probably about an 8-foot drop, thinking I'm going to be cool about this. And I hit that ice, went through it, and there was no cool to it. I was hyperventilating and doing everything I could to get my ass out of the water. But had a great experience, and somehow didn't have a heart attack. But had a great experience at the teams. I was always on the East Coast, though this DDS detachment was made up of frogs from both coasts. A guy named Woody Woodruff was the senior platoon commander. He was on the West Coast. He's a Mustang. Spent a career in the Navy, and then had a terrific group of enlisted guys with us, and we really started with a mission of set of schematic drawings and figuring out how to make this thing work. And fortunately, the engineers at Electric Boat had done a great job anticipating that. We did have to fit out a few things differently, but some of the hydraulics were under design. But we were put on the back of the sub, and we're operating out of Pearl Harbor, and it was good duty.
Yeah, I bet, compared to the East Coast. So how did being in the military in general and a SEAL in particular prepare you for going out on your own? I mean, it seems like a big switch to go from the hoorah world of SEALs to banking. I mean, can there be a more diverse career change?
I guess I could have been a hairdresser. That might have been a little different.
It probably wouldn't let you be a hairdresser.
Well, there probably some guy who went through BUD/S that is a hairdresser, but be as it may. There's a few levels to look at it. I think irrespective of the teams and special warfare and all that, I would say, my dad once said, and I really kind of resonates with me, being a bit older and having been in business a while or in life a while, he said, there's people who are in the military that while they're in the military, they learn that there are things you need to do because you have to do them, because it's your responsibility. It's not because you want to do it. It's not because you do it just because you like to do it, but you do it because you have to do it. And there's all kinds of reasons you have to do it. Sometimes it's to protect the guys that are with you, and it's just the moment it's required. But in general, that's something you learn at an early age, whether you go as an 18-year-old, either in my case, 18-year-old midshipman or 18-year-old enlisted, and I think that carries through life, and that's a very valuable lesson. And it's the difference as you get into different situations in life, whether it's as a family member, as a father, a husband, or certainly at work. So that's kind of, I guess, point one that's in the military generally, and I think. While the SEAL background I'm very, very proud of, my hat's off to anybody who served their country and is in the military, because there's just it's service. You're just doing a different job, but it's all part in the same direction to keeping the country safe and protecting the way of life that we enjoy, which obviously, news being what it is, increasingly is getting closer and closer to home, it seems, in terms of just terrorist activity and what have you. But in terms of the Navy and the SEAL team, I guess I would say that the special operations, I think there's a reservoir of confidence when you've gone through BUD/S And when you have served with the quality of individuals I had the pleasure to serve with on active duty and still enjoy relationships with, post-Navy, there's a reservoir of confidence where you've met certain challenges, you've faced those challenges, you've gotten through them, and I probably don't have to tell anybody who would listen to this podcast, life's tough, whether it's on a personal level or whether it's in business, and to have that reservoir of confidence to pull from. I can't tell you how many times I've faced some challenge and I've looked in the mirror and, as hokey as it might sound, sort of said, buck up there. I mean, you're gonna wear the name. You got to play the game, and quitting is not an option, and you just need to tough it out. And I tell people getting through buds is not really that hard. You just don't have to you just don't quit. So,
right.
It's not rocket science. And it is, I think, still true that everything that is asked of you in buds, in terms of that, which gets a lot of the focus in terms of the teams, but in terms of the buds and the training side of it, anything it's asked of you, you're trained to do. And I would argue you should be prepared to do it if you're awake and you're engaged and you're applying yourself. Now, obviously, some people can't take the cold. Some people would never jump out of an airplane. Some people find different parts of it intimidating, but there's lots of other things that I can't do that I find intimidating. It had nothing to do with special warfare. So, but for that skill set, I think you get this reservoir of confidence, and particularly when you're looking at entrepreneurship. And, my business is I'm an entrepreneur, having started Carolina Financial and a number of other businesses, some successfully, some not. But, knowing that even if you get knocked down, you just got to get back up. And it's interesting. I've got a client on the financing side who's a former NFL tight end, and he's around my age, and caught some passes from Bradshaw and all that at Pittsburgh, and did have a career-ending injury. But I wanted to ask him. I said, what's the parallel between the NFL and what you do? And this guy actually is an entrepreneur in the cosmetics industry. And he said, in the NFL, you learn that no matter how good you are, you're going to get knocked down. And the secret is to get back up. and certainly in business, you don't know it all. You'll never know it all. The business plan, like a warning order in the teams, is a starting point. But ultimately, you're going to have to improvise along the way and learn and adapt. And some of your first forays are not going to make it, and you got to get back up and try it another way. So I think it's as simple as that.
So is it like getting through buds and in business? I mean, but getting through buds, was the goal just deeper in you than someone else who quit? Or was it just pure stubborn? Like, I just don't want to quit buds. Like, I may hate the career, but I'm just not going to quit, and you just end up getting through. You know what I mean? Is it?
Well,
have a big goal like that.
I really wanted to be a frogman. I mean, I was totally dedicated to the job description. So,
right.
For me, it was the juxtaposition of if I wasn't going to be, I was either going to be a frogman and, all the stuff that goes with that, or I was going to be in some other role in the Navy. The one I had in my mind was the ice cream officer on the USS America. So I'm either managing the inventory for the ice cream vending machine, or I'm out there, jumping out of airplanes and blowing stuff up and, hanging out with the guys that make up the team. So to me, failure wasn't an option. I end up, there are a lot of guys who go into buds who are perfectly capable of being frogmen and get hurt and had an injury that knocked them out. I don't know the real number, but my guess is it's around 25% of any entering class. And, when I advise young men who are looking to go in this program, and there's a number of them that I have advised, and some of them I'll take them swimming and show them that an old guy can still swim. But give them a sense. A lot of them never swam a mile, much less a mile with fins. But I always make the point, the point of buds is to get through buds. you may be the fastest runner or the fastest swimmer or the fastest guy on the O course, but the point is to get through the program, and that's the mission. And it's great if you can, be the Ironman and be the head of the class and all that, but the real issue is to get through it and don't get hurt. And we had so many injuries when I went through. Sounds like the other gentleman you talked to was a winter class, so tend to have a little bit bigger surf at Coronado, and certainly colder. Although never as cold as it was at Little Creek. I will say the guys that went through BUD/S in the earlier years, I had former senior chief who was a class at Little Creek. Now those guys, that was tough. I mean, but, my goodness. But and in terms of, I will say this: the thing about BUD/S is it's a challenge that you face at the time, and while I don't go around a whole lot talking about my Navy background, in the bio, people see it and it comes up, and I talk to groups of entrepreneurs from time to time. And the point that I make, which may seem a little odd on this podcast, but, BUD/S is tough. Life is tough. We're, I think, in an environment where the society, our country, are looking for heroes, and SEAL Team is certainly an excellent place to look for it. These, guys are doing some amazingly heroic things these days. The operating tempo is like nothing the community's ever seen, which, of course, is why we've got the level of fatalities we've got coming out of Iraq and Iran, and why the swim's necessary. But I try to give people that I talk to confidence that, don't kid yourself. You're going through BUD/S in life. It's harder than hell sometimes, and you've got to somehow mentally prepare yourself for that. And you've just got to have a level of drive to be successful. So, having had the BUD/S experience, the SEAL Team experience is a great thing to have early in your life. But lots of people do lots of things that are challenging, and they need to find that and make that a reserve in the same way so they can face the other challenges they have. And as it comes to entrepreneurship specifically, with BUD/S, if you don't cut it on the O course on a particular day, okay, unless somehow you wash out or something, you've got another day to go at it. As an entrepreneur, whatever challenges evolve with your business, building your sales, building the company fast enough to maybe reflect the expected returns that investors are expecting who have been put money in your company. You're going to wake up with that every day, and you're facing the challenge doesn't go away. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is BUD/S is a very isolated series of challenges. In its totality, it could be a bit overwhelming, but you face it one challenge at a time. I would argue starting a business is harder because it's not, what you've got to do to succeed is not laid out for you. You got to figure that out. You may know where you want to go, but how you get there, you're not going around the O course. You've got an O course. You just don't know where the obstacles are in many cases. And
right.
When they do face you, you've got to get through them. So, I mentor a lot of, as a financier to growing companies, to middle market companies. I try to help entrepreneurs realize that, they're the SEAL Team of business, the SEALs of business. They're creating the jobs. They're facing the greatest challenges, and their success is probably where the individual contribution is the most acute, because the one, I think it's the studies show that the most consistent characteristic in a successful entrepreneur is perseverance. It's not quitting, which obviously sounds a lot like Navy Special Warfare.
Right. Well, I'm glad you said that, because I've thought that, but never being a SEAL, I couldn't say definitively, but I've thought that many a time. This is like being a Navy SEAL in business. I mean, there's a lot of dark nights. I mean, late nights, early mornings. It's like, where is the sun? And you're just faced with challenges. Website is down, chargeback comes in from a client, forms aren't working, client wants to haggle on pricing or return. You're like, why am I doing this? What the hell am I doing?
Exactly right. No, I think anybody who's wearing that badge of entrepreneur and is really playing the game where, their personal net worth is on the line, their reputation's on the line, they've walked away from a regular paycheck. You just got to have a lot of respect for somebody like that.
Because I was going to ask you too about you talk about like don't quit, but you did mention you started many businesses, some successful, some not. Mm-hmm. So how did you know when to hang it up on one venture? So
when you can't make it up on volume. I think when I talk to entrepreneurs, the first thing I ask them is if you've taken an accounting course. This is, I've talked to small groups, and a few folks will raise their hand, and my point to them is normally accounting is a language of business, and if you don't understand accounting at a basic level, I'm just talking about 101. I'm not talking about, the outer reaches of accounting. If you just take 101, what's a balance sheet, what's an income statement, what's cash flow? If you don't know that, then the chances of you being successful, I would argue, are very slim. The chances of you somehow getting screwed along the way is about 100%. So you need to understand that.
Right.
And then, gosh, I just had lost my train of thought there. Where was I going with that? What was that question again? Sorry.
Oh, what you were saying? Well, I asked, how do you know when to hang it up?
Thank you. So basically, So where I'm going with this is basically, if you don't understand the concept of gross margin, i.e., what's your gross revenue less your cost of goods sold, then you don't know sort of the inherent profitability, if you will, of the product or service that you're doing. And obviously companies that have higher gross margins tend to spend that money below the line into advertising and other categories of expense that don't happen to show up as cost of goods sold. But still, you need to understand the dynamics of the inherent profitability of your business. And I often take the example of a sweet potato. And I know a lot about sweet potatoes because while our finance practice is nationwide, we've done a lot in agriculture, and sweet potatoes are one of the most prominent crops in North Carolina, and it's actually produced about half the country, sweet potatoes. So if you grow sweet potatoes and you pack them, meaning you store them, you sort them and clean them and put them in a box and send them to a grocery store or someone, you might make a 10% gross margin. If you take that same sweet potato and you turn it into a French fry, and I know this because we financed the state's first sweet potato fry plant, and you're probably in the 30 to 35% gross margin. And if you take that same sweet potato and you turn it into perfume or you turn it into vodka, you're in an 80 to 90% gross margin business. Now, it doesn't mean one is necessarily, at the end of the day, more profitable than the other. One will certainly have a higher margin than the other, but you just need to understand your product and the inherent nature, or service, and the inherent nature of it. And so to your question about when do you quit, I think at some point you're looking at the basic, the realization of just what it takes to produce the service that you might not have known until you got into it. Of course, you also find out along the way that there are other snakes in the grass that you may not ever have contemplated, and it can be everything from the competitive nature of the business to the sales cycle for that product or service, and just what you're really facing to get your product or service to customers where they'll pay you for it. And I have to say, regulatory. There's regulatory creep in just about any industry, and understanding, to what degree the regulatory impact could undermine what you're trying to do. And that's a whole other conversation for another podcast. But I guess
I'm from the government, and I'm here to help, right?
Again, I'd love to talk to you about that at some other point, but I've had some hard lessons learned, butting heads with relatively senior, managers of state agencies, and they're operating in a different paradigm than the entrepreneur and the private sector.
Right.
So, but it's. I think you also. I once spoke at a thing. I think it's still going, called FailCon, and FailCon is I think trying to sort of recognize that there are failures and there are failures. There are failures where the basic building blocks of the business just don't get you there. Then, of course, there's failures where, and this is, I think, part of where your question's targeted. There's failures of just not putting the energy or into creating the right intuition, or rather, not using your brain. People that are in that bucket probably don't even know it, right? They're either quitters or they're just not, don't have the skill set for the business. But assuming you do, or I think entrepreneurship is largely, nobody's got every tool in the tool bag they need for entrepreneurship. I mean, period. Nobody does. And I think the successful entrepreneur has enough self-confidence or self-esteem that they don't mind reaching out and finding other people that complement what they do. And getting back to the SEAL team analogy, if you've got a 7-man squad, the guy you got running point is probably the guy that can hear the best and has got the best night vision. And the guy who's carrying the M60 might be a bit bigger than other guys. He can just take the extra load. I mean, that's just the way he's built. He's a stronger guy, and so on and so forth. Obviously, you've got a medic. They've had medical training, and so when they design, at least the SEAL squads that I was familiar with, these may have changed in recent years, but you were looking at the men that were going to be part of your unit, and you're trying to put those men in a role where they can perform best, and by extension, where your squad or platoon is positioned to perform best. And to me, that's a pretty good analogy for business and building a team in business. And an entrepreneur's not going to have a very big team by definition. So he or she better be very good at selecting the people that are in the team.
Right. Yep. I always bring up that story. I think it was Henry Ford. I don't know if he was being sued or just being confronted in the government, and basically they're saying, you're not as smart as you purport to be. And, he says, hey, I've got 15 buttons on my desk. If you want an expert on transmissions, I hit that second button, and the smartest man in the world on transmissions will be here in 5 minutes. You want to know about engines, and I hit the third button, and it's like, okay, maybe you are pretty smart.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't afraid to surround himself with smart people, right?
Yeah.
Amen. Well, man, this has been fantastic. But appreciate you going back in time, sharing some of the war stories, but bringing it back to current. If people want to get some good vodka or perfume or sweet potato fries, how can they find you? It's where should we send folks?
Well, if you're an entrepreneur or, for that matter, an investor in private transactions, we've created a website, www.carofin, like Carolina Financial, but CAROFIN.com. And there's actually two sites. One's targeted towards investors. We call it investment services. One's targeted towards issuers of securities or clients, the companies themselves. We call it banking services. And within that, there's an education section that we've tried to build a lot of content that can help you on either side of this coin, and in some cases people are on both sides, to be more informed and feel very strongly that there's a big gap both for issuers and investors in terms of the sort of entrepreneurship and the capital side of it. Personally, my email is Bruce Roberts, like it sounds, Bruce Roberts @carofin.com, same as the URL on the website. And feel free to reach out to me with an email. We, as a company, are a nationwide practice. We've got we're small, but we've got 1 to 3 professionals in Boston, the New York area, Miami, Raleigh, Charlotte, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. So we do financings of $2 to $200 million, and our investors are high net worth individuals to some of the largest financial institutions, professionally managed pools and funds. So, and if I can just help people in the entrepreneur path, would love to be able to do that, because got to give back.
Yeah. Well, and you're just proof that, not only Air Force guys can turn out to be good businessmen. So, that's, kudos to you, man.
Well, thank you for that. It's I will tell you that it's to the perseverance side, the market crushed me. I had a great late 90s, when NASDAQ crashed in 2000. The business I had at the time was totally venture focused, and so it suffered dramatically with it. And then right now, we're actually enjoying a great year. We'll do about $300 million of transactions this year, so maybe a bit more.
Nice.
So, matter of fact, it will be more. We've closed that much to date. So, would have been very easy to quit. And going back to the earlier part of this conversation, I will say that the Buds experience, that sort of anchor of self-confidence, and boy, it paid some dividends from about 2002 to 2008. So anybody who's listening to this who's facing those challenges, it's just not easy. And what you do know is if you quit, you're going to fail. So that it's a hard call to make. Sometimes you have to face facts. You're just not going to get there. But I guess another way to look at it is whether it's in this venture or circumstances suggest you shutter it and go into another venture. It's the you that's the consistent part of the entrepreneurship, and you gotta look in the long run here and be prepared for a tough road. But when you get to the other side of it, and I don't get the wrong impression. I mean, there's plenty of mountains I need to climb, but in terms of next goals. But I've been blessed with a lot of success on many levels, whether it's some financial success and certainly putting together some amazing teams of professionals and having a terrific group of clients. There's nothing better when you get there, and I would. Right. It's a goal certainly worth working toward. So.
Right. Amen.
All right, Wes.
Bruce Roberts, CFG. Thanks for coming on the Sales Podcast.
Thank you.
Told you were in for a treat. Don't you love the simplicity and the timelessness of the advice that Bruce follows, that his dad taught him, and obviously the SEAL community follows? Like you said, when you have to do something, when it's your responsibility, you just go do it. And so there's always something in business and in life, you don't feel like doing, but you got to get up and do it. If you're old enough to remember the guy in the Dunkin' Donuts commercial, got to get the donut, got to make the donuts. So hopefully your life isn't one big grind, but you know what? There may be stretches, even long stretches, where it's one big grind when you're trying to figure things out, when the unexpected comes your way. So like Bruce said, it's really easy to succeed. It's really easy to get through Buds, right? Just don't quit. Now, he says it kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's also 100% true. Now, sometimes you may wonder, am I going to make it? And if you've listened to the other episodes, several other guys mention, just get through the day, make it to the next meal, just get through this next evolution, they call it, the one exercise, the one thing they've got to do right now. And sometimes that's the way you've got to focus. But you've got to have a bigger goal in mind. Obviously, their goal was not to just grind it out their entire lives. Their goal was to become a Navy SEAL. It was to get through the 5 weeks and then the 12 weeks and then the year, and then get put into a team and then, retain that trident, do what it takes, because it can be taken away, if those guys don't live up to it continuously. I had David Rutherford Rutt, he mentioned that he had a bad attitude. And he was threatened with being kicked out of the teams. So it can happen, right? So it's this discipline. Dan Kennedy talks about discipline equals responsibility equals discipline. And so it's really up to you. I talk about that all the time in my sales training. The number one job of a salesperson is not to make the sale. It's to prospect. Because you and I cannot control, we cannot force someone, unless we have a gun, right? We can't force someone to give us their money. We can't force someone to buy. But we can force ourselves through discipline and responsibility to wake up every day and do what professionals do to create buying opportunities, okay? Make the calls, attend the trade shows, create the webinars, create the podcasts, write the blog posts, write the newsletter, create new ads, test the ads, measure the ads, create new sequences, create new automation and follow-up sequences. That's what you have control over. So, it's a double, even triple-edged sword. The reason I have these guys on. They totally motivate me. I love doing this for charity as well. Again, it's the helpwestswim.org is where you can donate. But just to get such good advice, from these guys. So it's been a fantastic experience hanging out with these guys and getting this type of feedback. So as I always say, go back and listen. Play this over and over again. Bruce was very forthcoming, as all of these guys were, about what it takes, the struggles he had, and how he overcame them. So listen to this and apply it to your life. Okay? Just listening to this isn't enough. Internalize the lessons and apply them so you can grow. And remember the new way I'm offering for you to grow for free. Simply visit iTunes or Stitcher and subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and text the word sales to 96,000. And as always, remember to sell different.